we have very insightful findings and the recommendations that we will be looking at today. And after this conversation, we will begin to publicly share this report. And it's also an opportunity to bring in these leaders to be able to look at the study in detail so that we can even improve it as we seek to begin to circulate it. I do not think I need to expand more because this is the work of the researcher that will do that. Just to pass quick apologies from our chair, who's in her constituency in Isiolo, but she will be tuned in as a participant. And also our partners, Uraia, my counterpart, Grace Maingi, was not able to join us because they are launching a different report with ISPAC this morning about public finance management and in the devolution era. And that is why they are not here. The conversation will go on and we'll be able to continue this conversation even beyond today after this release. Thank you very much, and over to you, Trevor, and our researcher, Dr. Karatu, and thank the panelists for availing themselves for this important conversation. And also the participants for making time to contribute to the conversation. Welcome, and continue, Trevor.
Thank you so much, Franklin Mkwanja, the CMD Executive Director. Then, without any further ado, because of time, we've already lost a bit of time, I'd like to call upon Dr. Karatu Kiemo, the researcher from CMD, who has done extensive work on this particular issue of implementation of pre-election pledges and party manifestos. Dr. Karatu, you have just about 30 minutes to take us through your research and your findings. Kindly share your screen as you go through it. Keep it within 30 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Trevor, and thank you everyone in the audience for finding time to come to this presentation. As I have been introduced, my name is Karatu Kiemo. I ordinarily teach at University of Nairobi, Department of Sociology, but I'm here presenting this work for CMD Kenya. The work is entitled Political Parties Implementation of Pre-Election Pledges from 2017 to date, 2017 to date.
Yes, go ahead, Dr. Kiemo. We can hear you and we can see the screen.
My outline is as follows. It is introduction, rationale, objectives, methodology, results, and then conclusions and recommendations. As a way of introduction, we note that political parties' pre-election pledges are a contract between political leaders and the electorate. And the pledges are often immortalized in party manifestos. According to literature, governing political parties are incentivized to implement pledges since the party will have to communicate about policy enactment in order to seek re-election. At the same time, opposition political parties also have a driver to implement their pledges, especially through registration, because it is still they are still competitors. But political parties face challenges that undermine the implementation of pledges, and these challenges can be internal. For example, there are cognitive limits. This means that those who craft the manifestos are not necessarily the ones to implement it, given that one could craft a manifesto while vying for a position, lose it, and then does not continue to be in the political context where the manifesto is being implemented. Externally, there are socio-economic, political, as well as legal and regulatory changes that can make implementation of pledges difficult. For instance, in Kenya right now, we are talking about COVID-19, which then moves our thinking from everything else to it. These are the political parties that are represented in the current 12th parliament, and the party with the largest majority is Jubilee. At the National Assembly, they have 49%, ODM 22%, Wiper 7%, ANC 4%, and so on. And in Senate, again, Jubilee has the largest membership, followed by ODM, Wiper, ANC, and KANU. The rationale for this study are one, for CMD programming, given that the project falls within, or the study falls within a project called Broadening Participation in Democratic Governance in Kenya, whose aim is, among other things, to strengthen the role of political parties in Kenya. Secondly, there is public interest, given that political parties have a duty to Kenyans, and they are also publicly funded. And number three, we know there are several social changes happening in Kenya. For instance, BBI, COVID-19, among other social influencers. The objectives of the study were one, to establish, or the general objective was to establish how political parties are implementing pre-election pledges with a view to generating a performance scorecard. And then the specific objectives were to examine Jubilee's implementation of policy-oriented pledges, and to examine the legislative performance of political parties represented in the National Assembly and Senate, and thirdly, to examine the legislative performance of political parties in county assemblies. The methodology is as follows. First, we targeted those political parties that are represented in the National Assembly and Senate, and also the contributions of independent members. The type of data we utilized was basically secondary data to determine Jubilee's performance, and these were mainly sourced from Kenya National Bureau of Statistics Economic Survey, the current one of 2020. We also did a survey to determine what people or the citizens think about the performance of Jubilee and NASA as a coalition in the opposition. And thirdly, we studied parliamentary bills to determine performance of political parties. And the bills that we studied were for 2018, 2019, and 2020. The results are organized according to the pledges that Jubilee made. And these are 10 pledges which are contained in their manifesto. And the first pledge was to create 1.3 million jobs per year. The results show that in 2015, Jubilee or the government created 847.3 thousand jobs, and that translates to 65% of the expected 1.3 million jobs. In 2016, they did 62%, 2017, 70%, and 2019, last year, they did 65%. So that tells you they are a bit short of the 1.3 million jobs promised per year. When we did survey from the membership of political parties ranging from Jubilee, ANC, Ford Kenya, NAC, and many other parties, we asked them the extent to which they think Jubilee government has achieved this pledge. And those who said they have achieved were 0, and then 92% believed that Jubilee government has failed on that. The second pledge was to create an apprenticeship for all university and college graduates. When we look at data in 2017, the total apprentice and intern positions created were 6,311, which translates to only 12% success rate. And then the survey data showed that those who felt that the government has achieved were only 2%, whereas half were that they are on course and 45% said they have failed. Pledge number 3 is about social protection, and the pledge is to number the number of vulnerable citizens supported through the cash transfer program from 700,000 to 1.4 million. When we look at the data contained in the economic survey, it shows us that generally there has been a reduction of the number of people receiving the cash transfers, and this is indicated by the total beneficiaries of 1.1 million beneficiaries against the 1.4 pledged, and this is a deviation of 21%. But we also note that funding for this program has been increasing in the for the three programs, that is OVC, older persons, and people with disability. The reduction in number of beneficiaries has been attributed to one, attrition, that is the mortality of beneficiaries, migration of payment to the beneficiaries from cash-based payment system to bank account-based system, which resulted to some people having challenges in opening accounts. We also note that within this pledge, the number of members registered in NSSF have increased by 2.4%. And then when we talked to individuals in the country, they gave this an achievement rate of 8%, or under 8% felt that the government has achieved, but a significant proportion of 63% said they were on course. Pledge number 4 was to expand the free primary school program to include free day public secondary schools. Here, when we look at the data, we see the enrollment in secondary schools grew by 10.8% to 3.3 million in 2019. We also note that the number of public secondary school teachers increased. That is teachers, not students, increased by 6%. But data also indicate that enrollment for primary school students as well as secondary school students have been declining. And also another important indication from the data is that the number of secondary, not secondary, but primary school themselves have been declining in the country. A related area of education is the TVET, which shows that TVET schools increased by 10.3%. And then the TVET trainees also increased by a significant proportion of 19.7%. When we asked individuals to comment on this pledge, the rate of success for this pledge, 19%, which is bigger compared to what we have seen before, said that the government has achieved. 35% said they are on course, and 46% said they have failed. Pledge number 5 was to produce at least 500,000 affordable homes in 5 years, which translates to 100 homes per year. The data that we looked at tells us that in 2019, only 530 units were created out of the expected 100,000. In 2018, the number was even smaller, 430 units. And reports indicate that there are works in progress in that area, and we know there has been problems with the law, especially where there was a requirement of establishment of a housing fund. But we also note that World Bank and AFDB African Development Bank have approved funding for the program. According to survey data, the success rate is only rated by 3%. Well, the rest say they are either on course or failed. Pledge number 6 was to expand free maternity care to include government for every expectant mother for 1 year. When we look at data, it wasn't forthcoming from the reports that we saw, but some studies have reviewed what is going on in the sector. And one important study, which is peer-reviewed, shows that the antenatal care visits have increased by 89% in 2019. And health facility deliveries also increased by 97%. And live births have also increased. And then emergency obstetric care also increased by 27%. The survey data seem to suggest this is so, because those who say that there is achievement were 29%, while 40% say that they are on course. The two would give us around 70%. Pledge number 7 was to ensure every citizen is connected to reliable and affordable electricity by 2020. The data, when we look at what it says about rural electrification, says there has been an increment of 5.8% from 1.3 million to 1.4 million connections. The current access rate in the country is 75%. That is, in 2018 was 75%, which is a little bit below the global coverage rate of 83%. And the success rate in 2019 rose from 20%, or in 2019 was 85%, which was an increment from 20% in 2013. The survey data gave a success rate of 5% and 68% as being on course. And you can see the failure rate declines for this pledge. Pledge number 8 is to expand food and agricultural production and doubling the fertilizer subsidy initiative and reducing the cost of fertilizer to 1,500. The subsidy program, when we look at literature and data, suggests that it is ongoing, and the cost range from 1,500 Kenya shillings to 1,800 Kenya shillings, depending on the type of fertilizer. Then there is the issue of the 2 fertilizer factories set to be built in Eldoret and Nakuru, where literature indicates that they are largely on course. Then there is the question of reduction of cost, which is doubtful. Literature says it is because of lack of the necessary raw materials in the country. The survey data indicate that only 11% says that there has been any success on this area, while a large 60% indicate that there has been failure. Number 9 is to complete the 57 larger scale dam construction program for purposes of supporting smallholder agricultural irrigation. Here, there is no specific data to speak about this pledge. We have media reports and other reports which tells us that some of the dam projects are going on, but we know some have also stalled amid claims of irregularities. And there is the high-grade dam on River Tana, which is yet to start by September 2020. This got a rate of 3% approval, or those who said that the government has achieved, while 68% noted that it has failed. Pledge number 10 was to digitize all government procurement processes, expand and deliver e-citizen services through the growing network of Huduma centers. Diverse literature indicate positive results, and this was endorsed by the survey, where only 8% said that there has been failure, where the achievement was reported by 24% and 68% said they were on course. Now, when we look at, as a way of summarizing what we have gone through, the top ranked pledges are the free maternity care. And here we are looking at those who reported the success, followed by digitization of government procurement services, then free day public secondary school, and the fertilizer subsidy program. The pledges that have been reported to have failed by the largest proportion of respondents were the 1.3 million jobs, the 57 large-scale dams, the fertilizer initiative, the housing project, and the free day secondary school program. Now, when we look at when we relate the statistics, the official statistics, and the views of respondents, we see that official statistics tend to suggest moderate to good performance on several projects, but individual ranking are not so favorable on most pledges. So there is an inconsistency there. But then there is a lot of consistency between the high-ranked pledges by both official data and individual rating, which tells us that the findings speak to the questions that are at hand. In light of NASA's role as the main opposition coalition to hold the government to account, we asked individuals to rank the performance of NASA on a number of pledges, but these pledges are not in NASA's manifesto listed as pledges, so we extract any ideas that suggest the aims of the party. And some of these ideas are: one, to promote good governance, to empower Kenyan people and communities through devolution, to promote inclusive government, etc., including to combat corruption. And the ranking among those who say NASA has achieved are only 14% for promoting good governance. That was the highest. And if you look at an issue like combating corruption is at 3%, as well as to ensure equitable sharing of resources is also ranked poorly at 3%. Then we looked at the last segment of these studies to look at the performance of the political parties in both National Assembly and Senate. And our method was to look at the party's strength in parliament, and then we see the proportion of numbers that they contribute. We expect that if a party has 50% representation in parliament, then its contribution should also amount to 50% of all the bills that have been transacted. In 2018, there were 21 National Assembly bills transacted, and only 2 parties, that is Jubilee and Ford Kenya, contributed. Trevor and everyone else, let me pause and sip some water.
All right, that is fine. Dr. Karatu Kiemo, I believe you still have a few more slides to finish up on this, but they're very interesting conversations there. And I see a lot of questions around how people are asking how they can get this particular document here. I see Brian Mabry saying, how can I get this document after the presentation? I'm sure CMD will share with you this document in just a bit as soon as it's done. And then we'll also get a chance to talk about the nitty-gritties of it all. Gilbert Melly says, I think political parties need to be informed over this. And Ian Kipngetich says, are these jobs pledged by Jubilee virtual? Because it has not been felt by the common Mwananchi. Hilary Kipkiru is also asking the same thing. He says, are those percentage of jobs created by the Jubilee real? And how are they spread in all the counties? All right. Dr. Kiemo.
Fair enough. Those are good questions. We will come back to them. Now, like I said, we are comparing the party's strength in parliament vis-a-vis the proportion of bills they are sponsored in parliament. And we see that in 2018, Jubilee had the largest proportion of bills transacted. That was, I think, 95%, and Ford Kenya only 5%. So we see an increase in terms of percentage points for the two parties. And then ODM's representation in parliament is 22%, Wiper is 7%, ANC 4%. So they did not have any bill sponsored, and therefore we deduct the portions that that they have in parliament, and this we consider below average performance. In terms of the areas in which the parties or the bills were in, we segregated them into three categories: political, economic, and social, which are the pillars identified in Vision 2030. And we see Jubilee's bills were largely on the economic sector, and that is 70%. That is on finance, we have 65%, and on industry, we have one bill transacted, while in the governance sector, they have 30%, and the social sector, only one bill. And Ford Kenya's bills were 3 on governance, 2 on rule of law. I'm sorry about that. There was only one bill from Ford Kenya, and that was on governance. I mistakenly read the summary. And in 2019, this is the performance of the political parties that sponsored bills in the National Assembly. Of all the bills transacted, 72% were from Jubilee, 10% were from ODM, Ford Kenya, 8%, and so on. And the independent candidate represent 2%. This is the performance then related to the strength of the, or when put against the strength of the party. For Jubilee, there is an increase of 23 percentage points. For Kenya, 2%, and for KNC and FAP and the independent member. And then for the other parties that did not transact any bill or transacted bills less than their strength in parliament is as indicated, minus 12% for ODM, minus 5% for Wiper, and so on. These are the sectors, again, what we working here to look at is Jubilee's area of focus, and here we see a lot of focus on the economic pillar. Is leading, and the others come behind. In summary, the National Assembly bills clearly respond to issues that are generic to Kenya's political, economic, and social needs, but there are a few bills that resonate more with the personal experiences and regional interests. The reason why we are saying this is because we are looking at bills transacted by members of political parties. So the bills may not necessarily represent the pledge of the party or the aim of the party, but more about the individual interest or regional interest. This is Senate data on Senate performance or bills transacted in Senate. Well, in 2018, there were a total of 35 bills transacted. Jubilee had 54%, ODM 26%, KANU 14%, Wiper 3%, and PDR 3%. Based on this, we see above average performance of KANU by 10 percentage points, Jubilee by 3 percentage points, and PDR 1%, and then below average performance for ODM and Wiper. By sector, we see that Jubilee's contribution is fairly comparable across the 3 pillars. That is 37% for political pillar, 31% for economic, and 29% for the social. When we look at ODM's focus, there is greater focus on the political pillar with 56 of the bills transacted compared to the economic and social pillars. And KANU, there is fairly equal representation in the political and economic pillar, but no focus on the social pillar. Senate performance in 2019 is 68% for Jubilee. That is out of 19 bills, they did 13 of them. ODM did 4 bills, that is 21%. Wiper and an independent member, 1 bill each. And here again, we see above average performance for Jubilee and average performance for Wiper and the independent, and below average performance for the others. So that is speaking about the same thing. I think this is more of the 2020 data. Okay, Senate performance in 2020 is still the same. 14 bills transacted, Jubilee 72%, ODM 21%, and Wiper 7%. In summary, the Jubilee's main focus is clearly on the political pillar in 2018, that is at the Senate level, and on the economic pillar in both 2019 and 2020. So we see a shift or a leaning towards the economic side for the governing party. ODM main focus was clearly on the political pillar in 2018, but again began to lean on the economic pillar in 2019. Ford Kenya and ANC had no bills in the 3 years. So our conclusions are that Jubilee seems to have done fairly well in implementation of pre-election pledges in both programs. That is the data that we looked at earlier, and in legislation. And considering the program results and registration, we see that JP is leaning on the economic and social pillars, which is also consistent with their manifesto. Whereas NASA's manifesto is heavy on the political pillar, especially on constitutional issues, the legislative agenda appears to lean more on the economic pillar. The opposition political parties have generally performed below average in the number of National Assembly and Senate bills. In conclusion, that is the conclusion, and now in recommendations, we are saying that there need to be continuous improvement for the political parties in implementing pre-election pledges. There is need for political parties to clearly name their pledges, that is, identify the pledges and clearly name it, and also develop indicators for it so that there is ease of monitoring by both the parties themselves and by the stakeholders, including the public. And finally, we say there is need for political parties management structure to own manifestos such that there is mitigation against the disconnect of those crafting manifestos and those implementing them. Thank you so much for listening.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Karatu Kiemo there. That's a very comprehensive analysis. And there's a lot of robust conversation already happening here on chat, and I see a lot of it coming through. We have one, Johnston Kotut, who says political parties need to develop systems of reporting the implementation of pledges. I wish we had a clause that calls for dissolution of government if they would not have implemented 50% of their pledges within their first midterm. It further says that the report then indicates that pledges are only meant to excite the public to vote, but once they take over power, no one makes reference to them. Let me open the floor for discussions on this, and I'll start with the panelists who are already here. Ms. Celestine Njagi, kindly unmute your microphone and very briefly just tell me your quick reactions to the report. Are you surprised by what you've seen so far, the implementation, especially of the pledges from political parties?
Trevor, can you hear me?
Yes, you're clear. Go ahead.
Okay. I am not very surprised, but there's one issue, especially on the jobs, that directly touches on the youth. Because that is one of the key pledges that is what the youth vote for. That when they're told there'll be 1.3 million jobs every year, they want to see whether it's going to happen. But has it happened? When they're saying it's about 92%, I honestly cannot say that I believe that is correct information, because you will find that it does not trickle down to the people, to the youth generally. And if it does, it is menial jobs. Do menial jobs really, how will they help in giving? When you read the manifesto, you will see they say they will give a decent and sustainable living for the youth. Is it decent when it's Kazim Tani and getting 2,000 after 2 weeks? How will do that? The cost of living is very high. There are taxes that you're paying by VAT and whatnot. So the 2,000 will not sustain. So it is quite a mockery when you say that the jobs that have been given are menial jobs. They really are not helping the youth as much. But there are also some things that can be commendable on the maternal health care, increased by 89%, which I believe should be okay. That is that is very good. Okay, they can do better, but it is good so far.
All right. Let me bring in Honorable Martha Karua on this. Honorable Karua, what are your preliminary thoughts on the report? And do political parties give pledges that they are almost certain they will not fulfill? Is there a disconnect between the pledge they give and the reality on the ground? For example, when you say you're going to give 1.3 million jobs, have you looked at the economic situation to realize that you will actually be able to provide the 1.3 million jobs, or are those pledges just meant to excite the electorate?
I think one thing we have to agree with is political party manifestos are actually put together by professionals who work on data, because no politician sits down to write a manifesto. They have think tanks. So even for the Jubilee manifesto, I would want to take it that it was well researched and it is something doable. But what gets in the way and what I'm missing from this report, when the researcher tells us that Jubilee has done well on bills in governance, that research doesn't follow through on whether governance has actually improved under Jubilee. Because I believe it is lack of improvement in matters governance that has hampered the otherwise well-meaning proposals by Jubilee from being achieved. So what I would flag out for this, for other researches, is that you must look not just as the performance in the National Assembly, it's also, especially for a sitting government, is actually how they are following that through in terms of governance. Like now you flagged out the dams. We all know why the dams are not there. We know all the scandals. You flag out subsidies to agriculture. Everything actually, the performance of a government is predicated on good governance. And in the absence of that, nothing can be achieved. They would have done better in electricity, in almost all the pledges, including free maternity, barring the interference on the programs because of bad governance and theft of public funds or misuse, whatever term you want to use. These pledges were fulfillable. And I'm comparing with the NAC pledges when Kibaki came into government, which I was part of, where he pledged free primary education, and it came to be, where he said water and electricity will come to you mashinani. And you could see that being implemented, although nobody really measured the reach. But what Jubilee is doing now is an increment of those that time. But very quickly, let me say 4 things I've thought about as this was going on.
Yes.
Do we as political parties or members, monitor our members' performance in parliament? And the answer is that from where I sit, because I've been in parliament for a long time, is that political parties actually do not monitor their members. Political parties do not give their members an agenda. Once in a blue moon, a motion may come and the party whip may tell you that this is a party motion, but it rarely happens. So as political parties, the lesson is that we should have a program for our members, whether in the national or in the county assembly. As parties not in government is my second point. Are we properly holding the government of the day to account on its pledges, blow by blow? And I think we are also lacking in that. The third issue that has come to me is whether the electorate is well prepared to hold leaders to account. Because I've been complaining myself, most parliamentarians, especially the National Assembly and Senate, you listen to them from the time they were elected this time round, all they are talking is about 2022, rarely about the electorate. If there was pressure from us, maybe it would change. Fourth and last, because I don't want to take too much time, is that you cannot compare government performance on bills with the opposition favorably, the way it has been compared. One, in every assembly, government has priority over the opposition on bills. The agenda of the assembly is driven by the government of the day because they have to put forward legislation and policy. The slot for parties not in government to push either bills or motions is normally once a week. So has this comparison taken that into account? Because if it hasn't, then we are overpraising Jubilee for an unfair comparison. Thank you.
Okay, all right. And Dr. Kiemo, I'll allow you to respond to the issues that has been raised by Dr. Karua after we get the reactions of all the panelists on this report that you've just launched there. Let me bring in Dr. Oscar Otele, who's a political scientist and governance
consultant. Thank you for calling me doctor, but I'm not.
Thank you.
There are too many doctors around here, but Dr. Otele, go ahead.
Thank you, Trevor, and thank you, Dr. Kiemo, for the report. Now, Trevor, I want to begin my contribution to this conversation from asking the broad question as to whether electoral manifestos matter in influencing election outcome, and especially in the context of Africa. To extend, then we can be able to begin from the point where the researcher laid bare to us that we can now be able, in the next election, assess the performance of a political party or a coalition in terms of their party manifesto. So having said that, it's a very important point that we cannot lose out as far as this conversation is concerned, because this is broadly contextualized into the factors that shape electoral outcome or voters' behavior and alignment in election all over the world. This is where where we are, so that we are able to put this research into its proper context.
Yeah.
Now, then linked to that point, and of course to the findings that have been shared by the researcher, is to then see the pledges as just a mere contract between political parties, the agent, and voters, to the extent that they can actually not even go ahead and implement. They are just they are called what? Promissory notes. They are not obliged to vote, and it becomes even real as my fellow panelist, Honorable Martha Karua, has said. You find these manifestos are designed by professionals. Now, when they are designed by professional, then to the researcher's conclusion, it then creates that disconnect between implementation and the initial idea about policy formulation. What one student of public policy called the disconnect between the root and the branch, the root branch problem. And this is exactly what we are having in Kenya, where political party or coalition gets into power, and it totally forget about what it promised. Matter then becomes worse in the context of evolving, political economic dynamics, as it is in the Kenyan. For example, 2017 Jubilee promises all that we have seen, and then 2018 we see now the leader of the NASA crosses over and joined, in the so-called handshake spirit. Start sort of working closely with the ruling party. Now, from there, then it becomes a bit dicey now to sort of assess their original intent vis-a-vis what is happening. It becomes complicated to be able to, really assess these pledges as actually what is the true picture on the ground. So my take is we take it on the face value as it is, but in reality, this is quite different as far as implementation of these pledges is concerned.
All right. Let me bring in Dr. Bosire and get your initial reactions to this report, Dr. Bosire. And there's a fundamental question that has also been asked by Dr. Otele there. Does electoral manifestos really matter here in Kenya when it comes to influencing electoral outcomes? Dr. Bosire, kindly unmute your microphone first. There.
Thank you, Trevor. I would like to say that electoral manifestos are important because the pledges actually form the basis of governance in the post-campaign period. When you enter into government or a party becomes or forms a government, the expectations of the people, not just the adherents or the members of that political party, but the entire nation, expects that those things, those pledges contained in the manifestos are implemented. The tragedy is that in most cases, politicians think that these are shopping lists. Once you have got to your position, you forget about it. But the public should hold a government accountable on the basis of those pledges. So those pledges are not just the maxims of prudence, as could be called by those who look at them as meaningless. They don't have a relationship with the reality. Expectation is that government should operate transparently and in an accountable manner by implementing the pledges they have made during the elections. In all democracies, you don't just promise, but you promise what can be done? What can be actionable? Unfortunately, some of our political parties, or most of our political parties, make those pledges for the sake of winning an election, and then they throw them into the dustbin. In fact, I would just continue on that level that look at even the pledge number, was it number what? The one on food and agriculture. Food and agriculture. What is the reality on the ground? When we talk about increasing the subsidy, have we actually increased the subsidy? Those who are farmers, I'm not a farmer, but my mother sometimes tells me to buy farm inputs. They are expensive. They're too expensive. Even when we buy those with subsidies, they come in with huge costs. So it discourages farmers from realizing, because the end result, subsidies are means to increase production and also lower production costs for the public to get better, higher profits or higher income from their farming and to improve their livelihoods. But if the costs are still up there, how can we gauge it and say we succeeded by providing this subsidy when the prices were up there? Or again, we interfere. The same government interferes with the marketing of those products. Maize, we know, has had issues in this country. Farmers were crying in Eldoret, in Kitale, and other places in the Rift Valley, the bread basket, just recently, and saying some cartels have imported maize and flooded the market. They couldn't get the market. Sooner or later, we are told, oh, the maize that was bought is full of aflatoxin. They have to be destroyed. Look at that. The reality of the promises and the reality on the ground. Are these promises actually bettering the lives of Kenyans?
Okay.
That is the question that perhaps we should have talked about. My brother Kiratu Kiemo should have looked at it in reality. What is it in reality? Not in figures like they did this bill, they did that. What impact has this made in changing the lives of the people? Look at electricity supply, for instance. Electricity, we can have a connection, but we know this monster called KPLC is exploiting everyone in this country. Recently, we have seen the electricity bills that we have received and the viciousness with which they want to get their money from the consumers. Nobody has gone to the parliament and protect consumers of electricity, perhaps also expanding or killing the monopoly that we have, the KPLC has enjoyed over the years. But telling me I have a connection, then I have a connection into exploitative system that is not going to help my life improve. That is what the people would like to hear when we are talking about political parties. Another thing I would like to say about the report is the issue of the causality or the connection between the political parties, what they do in parliament or wherever they do it, and what we see. Can we attribute job creation to political parties? Honestly, how do we create that linkage between what political parties have done on either policy issues? Yet we know there are multiple actors in the economy. We have private enterprises. There are people who are doing their own farming and employing people, doing their manufacturing, their juakali and employing other people. How do we attribute this? The issue of attribution, cause and effect. Can we actually say political parties have enabled us to have 1 million jobs in the country? You know, there's a multiplicity of actors that will give rise to the result. So that is an issue of methodology, and actually that the researcher should look at and see if we can attribute causality to what the claims is making. The final one I would like to say is what Mother Karua said regarding Jubilee. I was asking myself also, why is the ruling party then leading? There must be a reason. There must be a reason why it's leading, is because it is their agenda. The ruling party drives the agenda because it is the ruling party. So we can unfairly again conclude that the Jubilee has done much better than any other. And that would perhaps be erroneous because actually Jubilee is the ruling party and is driving the legislative agenda in power.
All
the
right.
policies that I drafted are the policies that the ruling party actually directs. So opposition can come up with, or the other parties can come up with the independent or private motions and bills and get them to parliament. And some of those parties have done so. That is the much they can do. So, so we need to be very careful in terms of generalizing that Jubilee has done really well. We need to bear in mind that the Jubilee party is the ruling party, but there are also most of the failures in that respect also should be on Jubilee party, not perhaps reaching out. We have seen the issue of governance where a political party should be the mobilizer. It should be the one to pass critical information to the public,
but
make
Dr.
democracy.
Bosire, you know, many would argue that if we can't attribute the successes directly to the ruling party, can we then attribute the failures to the ruling party?
We could do both. I'm saying if we do the successes, but again, scientifically speaking, if we did the science itself, can we actually attribute to the results, for example, job creation or apprenticeship, issues of apprenticeship and all that, to the ruling party or to any political party? Is there a linkage? There might not be any linkage anyway, or there could be a small linkage in terms of policy formulation and policy implementation. But there are a multiplicity of actors and factors that affect the entire process.
Okay. Let me bring back Dr. Kiemo on this. When you're doing the research, there's been several issues that have been raised in terms of policy and impact. What was your scope at the time? And do you realize that these are issues that should have been picked up in the research?
Thanks a lot, Trevor, for that. And thank you everyone who has commented on the report. Let me say this. Our strategy or our terms of reference was to see how political parties are implementing their pledges, the pledges that they made in 2017. And these pledges are contained in the manifestos. So all what we do is to go to the manifesto, get the pledges. Then where would we find the impact of those pledges, or where are those pledges being actionalized? We have only those 2 or 3 areas. Number one, it is in government programs or in programs. And this is what we took you through, the programs. If, for example, we say job creation, we go and look for data that is supporting what kind of jobs that have been created in Kenya. Of course, like my colleague, Dr. Bosire says, we have a government whose business is to implement programs. So when we see job creation, we cannot attribute it to any other political party except the governing political party, because it has the mandate of implementing programs. The other area is legislation. And then when we go to registration, we can only be informed by the bills that we see. And these are the activities of the political parties in parliament, whether it is at the National Assembly or Senate. And the third arm that we used was to get data from the public. That is, and these are members of political parties. So as far as we think, there is nothing else that could speak to the questions of the study. But I do accept some criticisms that are fair. And as I look at this, I could ask if the governing political party, that is Jubilee, can be related to some of the successes. And some of these are clear, like the Leader Mama program or the Huduma thing, the Huduma service, the Huduma centers.
Yeah.
Is there a likelihood that the governing party could have done nothing, could have done worse? And my answer is it is possible. So I think there is a sense in which we can attribute what the data is saying to the governing party. Definitely there is. But of course, the issue of causality is also very key to look at or to be careful with, because we are not attributing causality. These are just correlations that you see this happening, and this is what was said. So there could be a correlation between the two. Given that we are talking about Jubilee government or whatever government is there, so the government implements its programs through the government itself. So what we see is really can be attributed. But I do really accept the critical criticism from Hon Mother Karua about comparing the governing party and the opposition in the assembly. I think that is fair, and we can put that caveat in the data to say, yes, these are not at the same operating platform, and I think that is critical. But I also, let me say this, I do acknowledge what, and I'm going back again to Hon Mother, where she says that political parties do not monitor their members in parliament and they do not give them agenda. Because I think what this research was about, it is for CMD programming, and CMD works with the political parties. So when we see a finding that is critical to build the capacity of political parties, for example, to give members an agenda such that we can see what is happening in the assemblies is a reflection of the party ideas, I think that is very critical, and that I take as a very serious point.
Okay. Honorable Karua, on your point number 3, when you raise that the electorate don't seem to be prepared to hold their leaders to account, what do you think is the solution to that? Because we see the young people are the ones who vote the most. They form more than 70% of the population. They were told they will get 1.3 million jobs every year. That has not happened. They were given the youth access to government procurement opportunities, where 30% of all procurement from government and counties should go to the youth. Now we know that the older generation are registering companies with the names of the young people, and the money still goes to the old generation. How then can that mind shift be switched so that the young people know that if you make a promise, this is what you need to deliver, and if you don't deliver it, there needs to be repercussions?
I think this is to all of us, to political parties, to civil society, to all Kenyans of goodwill. How can we prepare ourselves as citizens to be able to better hold governments to account? How can we, county by county, have a critical number of people who actually go through the programs of each of the county governments and at the national level, the national government? That is what is coming to my mind. And it is something, because CMD is all the parties together. This is a program we could try and develop. We've been putting questions. How are the political parties' funds shared? Because the funding enables parties to roll out programs for their members, including the youth. And that is where you can develop capacity for people to be able to hold the counties to account. If the political parties' funds are shared firstly at the national level, then at the county level, then we are strengthening democracy at the county level. If you take Kirinyaga, for instance, where it was said that I had 44% of the vote, I may not believe that, but taking it as 44, if we were to receive funding at the county level, it means NAC Kenya would be receiving 44%, therefore able to roll out programs to hold the Kirinyaga government to account. And this can be said of every other county. And we have to worry whether as parties we are also fulfilling our constitutional mandate. The constitution says Kenya is a multi-party democracy. It is talking about that deliberately and giving a minority and majority leader so that there can be that competition even at the assembly level. And I think it's part of the growth of our democracy to have capacity to interrogate programs, budgets, etc. And that's what I'll be rooting for.
Okay. Celestine, as a representative of the young people here in this panel, where does the problem lie? Because Dr. Tele also asked, the electoral manifestos, do they really matter in influencing the outcome of the elections? But do the young people even read those manifestos to begin with, or are they voting based on tribe or based on what they've been given?
First, I think the youth, once the manifesto is rolled out, that is what you find the politicians go around the country. These are the promises that they offer to the youth, that maybe the 12 number manifesto is what they shall do when they come to, maybe when after they're voted in. And those are the promises which the youth rely upon for them to manage to vote in a leader. But most of the time, you'll also find that the youth are also excited either by handouts, or they'll also be excited by one clause that the politicians actually will note in the manifesto that will excite the emotions of the youth. For example, when they come and say what we said first, we will give you 1.3 million jobs. They do not say how, and they do not say what jobs. But once a young person who is desperate for a job hears the word jobs, I am going to get a job, and that's it. They might just roll with it because of just one point. But they're also forgetting, what kind of jobs are you going to be offered? Are they actually even going to come? You find that the Jubilee government, when you ask the youth the reason they're saying 0%, they're saying it's a failure. It's because we have not seen those jobs. Which ones? They have just menial jobs and they won't help sustain them. When you talk about the schools, you find that the youth, we are being shortchanged. You're told, go to school and then excel, get a job. When you're out here, you're given internships, which will last for 6 months, and then afterwards you will be jobless. Yeah. So, and what you're getting paid as an intern will not even sustain you till maybe you get the next job, or some of them will not even get access to these jobs. So you find also in the school sector, they're failing, and they're failing very bad. When you also now come to agriculture, which is also the backbone of the country, and now if they were to actually, for example, when Honorable Mother Karua talked about the dams will be very, you see, especially the Kimarel and Arrow, those are very, this is also where the agriculture will thrive. You see our, like the KTDA, the tea crop farmers, which now, of course, it's the young people who are being employed to do this kind of jobs. They're not paying them well. So when the government and corruption comes in, it cripples everything. So I believe it's also upon us, the youth people, as the young persons, not to be excited and also hold the government accountable, and also not to shun those people who hold the government accountable, because you are finding that when someone comes out to criticize the government, they will find that the majority of the youth will be the ones criticizing the people who are criticizing the government. So there's also there's less information on what the government should do and how they should hold the government accountable. That I believe is up on us to find out on how to do so.
Dr. Bosire, do you see a disconnect between the policies and the manifestos on the ground? For example, there's one side, the president launches a 1.9 billion shilling for desks and goes to carpenters and tell them you can locally manufacture this. They look for money from the banks. Now they're facing interest and possible auctions, because just by that declaration, it didn't mean that the process was done. There's a whole red tape system that has to identify suppliers. But then because the president declared it right in front of you, you've already started working. Is there a disconnect between the empowerment and red tape of the young people?
Unmute, yes. I think, Trevor, that is what we are struggling with. Is there a connection with, and I don't think what government did was necessarily a policy, but government, the president declared that this is going to happen. And of course, like it's a populist position, we're going to get money to give it to the Juakali to manufacture these things. And people go out and borrow, as you have said. There is a disconnect. In most cases, there's a disconnect between that public policy, let's say from the policy standpoint, between public policy and governmental action. Yet, it shouldn't be the case, because policy should be clearly based on the needs or on the interests that have been identified by our leaders, and then properly researched on and critically evaluated. And finally, when you pronounce yourself on it, already there is a program of action that you can envisage that has already been put in place. But in this case, government makes declarations, but you know there is also multiple interests in the process, and people will be.
Dr. Busire, you're back on mute again. Kindly unmute.
I'm sorry, an interference from my phone. Those who are supposed to supply the service will always be shortchanged. We cannot blame maybe political parties or any other. I think our problem is with the values. Parties also, political parties, I would say, have failed in providing political education to its members. Political education will start from the point that people should understand the democratic values, the norms, and such as the supremacy of the law, equality, justice, responsibility, political liberty, which are essential elements of individual liberties and personal responsibility and community solidarity. These are the things that political parties should have taught their people. And that we can now look at that and critique policy vis-a-vis the actions that government takes. That dissonance between government policy and action is there. But again, who shall correct it? Political parties can galvanize their members actually to voice their concerns, and government will correct. Like Mother Karua has clearly said, Kimarel and Arol Dam, we had it. It was written. It was in the media. What has happened? And yet it was an expectation that people had that they will get jobs, they'll get the water, they'll get other activities associated with the dam construction, whether it will be tourism, fishing, and all those other activities. Market, urbanization will arise around out of that process. You know, all these things will mean well to the public in terms of the economy and social well-being.
Okay.
But
let me bring it
this connection.
Yeah. Let me bring in Dr. Oscar or Tele on this. Doctor, you've been quiet for a bit. We lost you there for a short while, but now you're back with us. There's a question here from Enoch on Kobo saying, can we attribute the underperformance by the main opposition parties to the 2018 handshake? Dr. Tele, kindly unmute your microphone first.
Thank you, Trevor, for the question. And my contribution is, let me just add a voice to what my colleague has mentioned in terms of the disconnect between political parties and the public policy. Actually, that is where the problem begins. The inability of ruling party and of course the other party, especially the ruling party, to convert abstract promissory notes into actionable public policy to the extent then that once a ruling party takes over instruments of power, it then backtracks on the those pledges. They are not consistently followed in terms of what we promise and how we can follow through in terms of when it comes to implementation. And so things are done haphazardly. That haphazardness then invites opportunity for entrepreneurs to come in with their own ideas, which were not originally in those manifestos, mainly to serve their own personal interest. Now, returning to the question that you asked about the underperformance of political parties as attributed to the handshake, again, this goes back to the problem of our own political parties in terms of their ideological shallowness. We cannot be able to pinpoint these political parties and say that this is the the structure of their framework in terms of economic outlook, in terms of social outlook, in terms of political outlook, so that when when the NASA leader, joined, decided to work with the ruling party, can we then be able to that extent be able to assess what was his original intention as far as if it's the question of, for example, political stability is concerned, what was the thinking? Unless our political parties have that ideological structure, then we cannot really be in a position to evaluate them in terms of their performance. So the underperformance is on that basis, Trevor.
Okay. Honorable Karua, there's another question here, which relates to almost what we were talking about, from Moses Kamau, who says, how come the legislation hasn't translated into jobs on the ground? This almost relates to the youth access to government procurement opportunities, which you were talking about. And now the BBI is suggesting a 7 years tax break for the young people who come out of school. What are the guarantees then that the older generation will still not do the same thing, register companies with the names of the younger people so that they enjoy the tax-free 7 years and still end up marginalizing the youth?
We go back to the same question of governance and how we as the electorate can hold the party in power, and indeed all parties, to account on their pledges. Right now, Jubilee is talking about the tax break, when the youth have not even enjoyed the 30% of the jobs. You can be given a tax break, which means nothing to you because you have no employment and you have no environment to start a new company. Because if the 30% jobs for the youth in procurement were available, a majority of youth would now be doing something meaningful. But as you say, it is other people who are enjoying the jobs under the name youth, enjoying the names of PWDs, and enjoying the jobs of women. All you need is put a woman's name on the company and get the whatever. So it's a question of chicken and egg. And legislation will not bring jobs. It brings the legal framework. Policy won't bring jobs. It brings the framework within which you operate. And that is why for the jobs created, although Jubilee has not created them directly, I wouldn't begrudge them that they have created those jobs largely because they have provided the environment. But if there was better governance and the money for investments was going down to investments, not to people's pockets, they could well go beyond the 1.7 million jobs. So again, we go back to the question of good governance. And this is where we have to ask ourselves as citizens, how do we push the accountability back, with or without funding as parties? What it is that we can do. You find all the assemblies are like a single party state. In the ODM strongholds, it's almost only ODM. Jubilee strongholds, the same. Where you have mixed 2 or 3, the parties are not either guiding or helping those few members to do something meaningful. I appreciate today's conversation. I appreciate the information we've been given by the presenter, because it is now making me think, even as a party leader, what is the template we are going to give our party members? What are the obligations? So let us begin afresh from where we are now.
Okay. Dr. Kiemo, there's a question here from Titus Kalende, who says, can we also try to establish the causes hindering the political parties from delivering on their pledges, especially those in power? You had mentioned one of them being the cognitive limits. Those who craft the manifesto are not the ones who end up implementing it. And of course, there's the economic situation and the social issues. Like right now, most of them would say COVID-19 is here. So you don't expect us to create 1.3 million jobs as was planned. Dr. Kiemo. Just unmute your microphone, please. Dr. Kiemo, you're still on mute.
Thank you very much, Trevor. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Let me say there is a very interesting and a very consistent observation in literature that normally across the world, governing political parties tend to do better than they are evaluated by the public. That is a very consistent observation in literature. And so, and I think this relates perhaps to one fact that rarely does the government come out to say what it has achieved, because to assess what the government has achieved requires a study like this to assess its performance. And rarely do you get that. Number two, we know, like one of my friends ever told me, that when a government builds a new road, it doesn't go public and telling people there is a new road, go and use it. If it was the public sector which built a new road, it will be advertising and it will be marketing it and so on and so on. Now, coming to more specifically to your question, what are the factors that may hinder a governing political party to achieve its pledges? I think there can be any number of issues here. There can be any number of factors. First, there are the internal factors within the governing party itself, because its own dynamics, which could be a capacity, which could also be the distractions, the disruptions, or whatever would happen within the party internally. And also issues of budget, etc. But also there is the external environment, and the external environment is key for any organization. And this might be political changes, because the moment a political party is governing, it doesn't sit flat because there is the opposition who wants to take power. So most of the times you might find that you are thinking that you're implementing, and then the opposition comes and threatens to take what you have.
Yes.
Say, think about Kenya locally, although I don't want to go to this because it's not my fault. If the Jubilee government, or let's say more specifically, President Uhuru Kenyatta came into handshake with former Prime Minister Raila Odinga to help implement the programs, to cool the space so that they could implement its program. Consider if there was no handshake. Most likely the things that we are talking about today, we will not be talking about them as success, like the Huduma Center or whatever other programs that have some little bit of success. So there can be any number of factors. Think about the impact of BBI, what it has done to Jubilee, maybe positive. What has it done to the opposition in checking the government, maybe negative. You know, all that business, I think those factors come into play.
Okay.
But there is also the economy. And also the social world, the expectation of people, because people will, the electorate are waiting to see what the party is doing, and they can shift. That's why governing political parties lose power. How do they lose power? It is because they have been judged, they have been evaluated by the public as non-performing. But how does a party get re-elected? It is because there has been an assessment of some favorable rankings, such that the electorate may say, can you continue with governing? I think it is all complex in that way.
Okay, let me try and get a few more questions coming in here. And Dr. Bosire, I'd like to start with you on this question from Mordecai Wanaina. It says the survey shows a disparity between official statistics and individual ratings. Is there perhaps the problem that Kenyans are not aware of what is being done by government in certain sectors, not familiar to them, to the extent that official statistics are relatively good, but very poor from individual ratings? And how then can this be tackled? Does the media have a part to play in providing more information to the public? Dr. Bosire? Kindly unmute your microphone first. Okay, I seem not to be able to get Dr. Bosire for now, but Celestine, you can handle this as well, or I can bring in Honorable Martha Karua. But let's start with Celestine. You've been quiet for a while. Is this the situation here that people generally don't know what the government is supposed to do?
Exactly. I believe most people know what the government is supposed to do, but it is the government that does not deliver on what it says it will do.
Okay.
Yeah, that's my stand on that. Yeah.
Okay. Let's bring in Honorable Martha Karua and answer a question from Brian Okoth. Brian Okoth is saying, can the opposition's failure to provide checks on the government be considered as a failure to implement its pledges and mandate?
Yes, if the opposition had pledged to have good governance, if you're out of government, then it's your role to push for good governance. If you push and the government, you will have done your work if you push and the government fails to implement. If you try to put bills in place or policy and it is defeated, for me, I would consider that opposition party has done its work. But I think what happens is that after people lose elections, they lose steam as well. And you will find that the performance is just like giving up, letting the government go on with what it wants to do. And it's the same with the electorate. They lose hope and just go back to doing their things. We have to find a way, and political parties have greater responsibility to keep the fire burning.
Okay. Dr. Otele, you can handle this question from Kennedy Omulo because it's in line with what you had raised earlier on. Kennedy Omulo is saying that the moment presidential contestants fail to attend or participate in presidential live debates to explain their manifestos, it becomes useless. The question then is, are Kenyans interested in manifestos during election?
Thank you, Trevor. Before I answer that question, also allow me to add my voice to the first question.
Yeah.
The first question, can you hear me?
Yes, you're clear. Go ahead.
Yeah. The question about whether citizens, whether the citizens are aware yes. And my response to that question is, again, the way the state has been established in Africa. Ideally, we have talked about the notion of nation state, state being responsive to its citizens, and of course, being obligated to perform a number of its constitutional role. But in Africa, and Kenya in particular, it's actually the other way around. The state is coming first and then the nation. And so it is actually what the state wants and then citizens follow. And this is the whole problem that we have as far as party manifesto and implementation of those pledges is concerned.
Okay.
Turning to the second question about
whether Kenyans manifestos, yes.
Yeah, whether Kenyans are interested in the manifesto and whether that also influences electoral outcome. This is where I began my contribution and asking the whole question as whether electoral manifesto matter in influencing the outcome. My take is the manifesto here is a weak intervening variable in terms of relating what the party stands for and what the citizens what the outcome will be, and therefore it is very difficult to sort of relate what the presidential aspirants say about what they will do and how that then feeds into people's mindset and influence the electoral outcome. And so the big factors in the context talking about ethnicity at the end of the day are actually having a greater causal influence on the outcome and not manifesto per se.
Okay. All right. Let me bring in Dr. Busire back on this. Dr. Busire, there's a question from Stephen Namusule who says, can the panelists explain the difference between a party manifesto and the National Development Plan? When do they converge or divert?
Now, I would like to make a comment, a brief comment on what the question that Dr. Otelo was responding to.
Yeah.
I think our country, and this is not new, our country should shift away from ethnic, clan, regional politics to issue-based politics. That members of the public would vote for example, for NAC Kenya, because of what NAC Kenya stands for, because of what the candidate has said will do to the country, having identified the critical issue, national concerns, and crafted them in a manifesto to address those national concerns. Meaning that then we shift away from ethnic politics or politics based on other things other than the issues. So manifestos are important to the extent, for me, to the extent that they can help us shift away from ethnic politics, regional politics, into issue-based politics, to ensure that actually, again, political parties should ensure that they implement their manifestos when they get to power, so that there is a connection between those pledges or those promises in manifestos and the actions that follow once a political party has come to power. That will make a big difference. People will have allegiance to political parties and not to ethnic kingpins. Okay. Now, to the question you raised, can you repeat the question, please?
Yes, the question is, explain the difference between a party manifesto and the National Development Plan. When do they converge and when do they divert?
Yes, a party manifesto, as the name suggests, is that program. I would say it could be like a program of action by the political party that once they get to power, this is what they're going to do. Is the party, a declaration by the party on how they're going to handle governance once they get into power, or government wants to get to power. What are their priorities? Now, when we get to a national development plan, a national development plan is not necessarily a party document. It is actually a government document. And government is not just that particular party. A government is made up of 3 arms. In other words, all of us will fit into government, but not fit into a...
You're on mute again, Dr. Bosire.
Is this plan that outlines what the government is going to do to address specific issues. If it is an issue of education, how they're going to address education. Okay. If it's an issue of infrastructure, we're going to develop this number of roads and this the amount of money to be spent, perhaps even where we shall source the money to be able to do all this work. So, but one could lead to the other or would influence the other. A party manifesto can find its way, or the proposals in the party manifesto can find their way into the National Development Plan. But the National Development Plan is much wider.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're running out of time here, but let me try and squeeze in a few of the views that we're seeing here from more than the 100 people who are joining us online. Before I give you a chance, a minute each for closing remarks on this. Where do we go from here is the question. As you think about that, this is what Abraham Maruti is saying. The survey should include county assemblies because they are a critical component in implementation of party manifestos at the county level. Ian Kipngetich says that question on how Jubilee's achievement as well as other leading parties is spread across counties would project how a political party would be all-inclusive. Please revisit Hilary Kipkuru's concern. Justice Anzaya says it's a good report there. Congratulations to our researcher, Dr. Kiemo, on pledges. It shows that the party pledges are just amtama to brainwash the public in voting. And then also, can we have Winnie Chepto says our legislators need to understand their role in pushing for the actualization of their party manifestos. And Moses Kamau, we already posed your question, and we see here Titus Kalende says, can we also try to establish causes hindering the political parties? That we also covered earlier on. Christine Dungu says the corruption and scandal surrounding some of these pledges, for example, pledge number 9, makes it really hard to believe that anything is actually happening on the ground. Even the youth jobs that apparently have been created, I know Professor has tried to explain, but I feel things are very different on the ground. There's zero impact. Let's see, Nicholas Melly says the bitter reality is that these pledges just remain in the paper, especially when we have seen in the ruling party Jubilee. They have resources, but little to smile about in respect to these pledges. Kennedy Omulo says Jubilee has improved on infrastructure development, which the report did not capture. The issues of laptops and stadiums, which is rated 0 in terms of implementation. Implementation of manifestos are dependent on political goodwill of both the ruling party and the opposition. It also depends on the political environment after the elections. Otherwise, manifestos are just sweeteners. Sonia McKenna says, Honorable Martha Karua, how can accountability structures be created given an executive that intimidates any critics to silence? There's also another question here as give your final remarks. Is what hinders the public from holding the ruling party accountable against their manifesto? That's from Brian Mabry. Can one seek redress from court for party misinformation? So this is the point where I now take your closing remarks, a minute each, because we're running out of time. And I'll start with Celestine Jagi.
First of all, I'd like to say, in relation to the youth, we need to empower the youth by engaging through open government and stakeholder participation. Okay. That is number one thing that needs to happen. We need to include the youth in the board. We also need to see the youth in top positions. Yeah. Not use these excuses, as I would say, that they are irredeemably corrupt, as the president once said in 2018. That shows there is no good faith. So the government of the day needs to act in good faith and include the youth, both in the top and also when they say decent jobs, they should actually offer decent jobs, not just menial jobs.
Okay.
Most Dr. Oscar? Is they also...
Thank you, Trevor. My concluding remark is that yes. To allay the
sorry, because of that, time.
To allay the thinking that development of political party manifesto is just a public relation exercise, will be that party members need to own this manifesto, internalize it clearly, so that we can be able to reduce what our presenter talked about, cognitive challenges. And parties must listen carefully to what those outside those parties are saying, so that then they can also consider that as an item to be put on the agenda.
Okay. Dr. Bosire, just 1 minute for closing remarks. Unmute, please.
I would say, Trevor, that political parties are the lifeblood of democratic systems of government across the world. Yeah. And we cannot avoid political parties. What we can only do is to make them better, both internally and how they relate to the larger public.
Okay.
Any pledges that political parties make should also help in creating confidence, public confidence in our institutions, because political parties are also public institutions, because they gain from public funding. That we can use political parties to create confidence, rather than using political parties to erode the little confidence that Kenyans have on in public institutions. So parties can be enabled internally and also be able to play their rightful roles in society, public education, participation, involvement of their members in activities, party activities, and also in governance, in ensuring that the right things are done in public interest.
Okay. Honorable Karua, 1 minute. Just unmute, please. Kindly unmute. Yes.
Now, I think that people should form pressure groups or join existing ones to be able to hold parties and, and the government to account. And here I also want to say this discussion is a wake-up call to professionals to join political parties so that within the political parties, they can promote ideas and accountability, and then it translates to accountability among political parties in competition. And that is, I take that as a government is as good as the political party that forms it.
All right. Dr. Kiemo, as the lead researcher, a minute for closing remarks.
Thank you so much, Trevor, and thank you everyone who has given feedback on this report. I think the most important thing to acknowledge is that the work was done within CMD, whose mandate is to promote internal democracy within political parties as well as within the country. And I think the most important thing is that political parties should think about the manifesto as not just promises, but structure it properly such that within it there are the statements or actionable plans such that when you are promising something, you go on to say how it will be fulfilled. And that way it will be easy to monitor how the political parties are implementing those pledges. They should not like love as promises.
All right, thank you so much. Honorable Martha Karua, Party Leader, NAK Kenya, thank you so much for making time for us. Honorable Isaac Ruto, Party Leader, Chama Cha Mashinani, was with us earlier on, but I think something came up. He logged off. Ms. Celestine Njagi, Advocate of the High Court of Kenya, thank you so much. Dr. Richard Bosire, Political Scientist and Lecturer at the University of Nairobi, Asante for making time. Dr. Oscar Otele, Political Scientist and Governance Consultant, thank you so much. And to all of you who've logged in, the more than 100 of you, we appreciate having these conversations every single day. We hope that we get to have this chance at some point. My name is Trevor Mbiji. It's been an absolute pleasure, but I'd like to call upon Franklin Mkwanja to give a vote of thanks. Franklin Mkwanja. Franklin.
Thank you very much, Trevor, for the wonderful moderation, and thanks to our panelists for the really insightful conversation, and our researcher for leading that conversation with the findings and the approach that he gave it to this study. I also want to extend our sincere thanks to representatives from member political parties and participants who tuned in into this conversation. Our intention is, of course, to continue this conversation of broadening participation through accountable, inclusive, and democratic political parties. And this is really key. This subject is also very important because you appreciate, and as the discussion has shaped, manifestos provide a sound basis for measuring levels of political accountability. And we have also observed that they play a crucial role in visions of party democracy and a fair analysis of party competition. And so our take is that as we seek to counter really highly ethnic politics that really revolves around tribal kingpins with issue-based politics, we must also be wary of populist politics by beginning to demand and taking this from what Honorable Mother Karua has said, asking all of us to make contributions to the strength of political parties and making sure that they are indeed competent public institutions. We can only be able to demand and receive detailed and specific pledges from political parties if the political parties are enjoying quality membership, not just quantity membership. We have also to make sure that political parties are remaining very active in between elections. As CMD, we want to contribute to this by continuing doing some of the things that we are doing now, like generating knowledge through such research to inform multi-party discourses in between political parties and also at intra-party level, because this is key, that the membership is well informed, the party leadership also has a clear understanding and grasp of the critical issues that interest the public. And for this study as a scorecard, our intention is that we will want to undertake it periodically so that the pledges and manifestos that the political parties offer us as a social contract during elections are properly used as instruments to promote political accountability. So this is what we really want to do, and I want to really appreciate the university dons, Dr. Kiemo, Dr. Bosire, Dr. Otele, for always bringing in the theoretical and intellectual perspectives into this. Honorable Mother Karua for always being available to make contributions to these important discourses, and also Honorable Isaac Ruto, who was unfortunately unable to remain with us, and the young people that are taking cue and becoming increasingly active. This is the only way you can be able to strengthen the institutions of public, of political parties, because as we agree, the weakest link in our democratic development chain are our political parties. So how do we collectively work together to make sure that they're becoming stronger and better institutions? Because with improved governance, we have proper adherence to the rule of law. We are able to deliver public, service delivery to people at all levels. And this is easily achievable through strong political parties. So thank you very much on behalf of the leadership of CMD and the member parties. Have a good afternoon, and let us continue this discourse. The study will be circulated in the coming days in both soft and hard copies. So feel free to read and continue the conversation towards an issue-based political party dispensation. Welcome and have a good afternoon.
All right. Thank you so much. Have a great afternoon ahead.